Like cooking, everything has a recipe.
A set of instructions to follow in order to gain a certain result.
Music is no different.
Be it ingredients for a dish, a set list for an amazing show,
Or a release strategy for a successful launch.
these are all recipes.
Hi, we're your hosts, Sean.
And I'm Brandon.
Come and join us in our kitchen as we go through the Music Maker's Cookbook.
Let's get cooking.
Welcome to the Music Maker's Cookbook, the podcast that helps independent artists cook up recipes for success in the music industry. My name is Sean,
I'm Brandon.
and we had a great recording today. We had a great episode.
We did. We're recording this post-interview, just to let you know. So we're kind of doing this a little bit backwards, but that's how we do.
Yeah.
That's how we did it last time. So
Well, we just finished recording it, so we're hype on that conversation that we had. It's a great episode. Stick around. We're going to get a lot of really good information on it. Gemma Sugrue. We'll go more into her qualification and what she's done in the past and like her whole history or bio, whatever, at the start of the interview. But she's done a whole bunch, but she specializes in singer-songwriting, coaching, and vocal training and things like that. We got links to all of her socials, so if at any point you really like what she's saying, you can go and check her out. We highly recommend you do it. But man, it was a lot of fun. We learned a lot about just kind of creating music and an artist's perspective on all of this for content creation and just in general being consistent through the aspect of someone who, well, the aspect of writing songs.
Yeah. Yep. As a songwriter, I got a lot of great perspective from her, and she really just like, I really like how she balanced like the creative mind versus the business mind and how those two can intermingle. And not only that, but like you can use creativity in your business, which is obviously a very big necessity. And a lot of people tend to shy away from that. And she was like very encouraging of doing that. And it's just nice to hear a fresh perspective and hear it reiterated, you know. And I think she explained some things extremely well, very clear. So definitely, you know, if you find a lot of value from this interview, definitely go check out her stuff because it was just she was just a wealth of knowledge. It was awesome talking to her about it.
Yeah, for sure. With that being said, we're not going to hold out the information any longer. Here's the interview.
Here it is.
Welcome to the Music Maker's Cookbook, the podcast that helps independent artists cook up recipes for success in the music industry. Today is a really exciting episode. I'm really looking forward to it because we've got a really exciting guest on here today. She's worked as a soloist for TV and festivals such as Dancing with the Stars, The Late Late Show, and Electric Picnic. Has collaborated with artists such as Bon Iver and Maverick Sabre. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right, hopefully. Has coached many artists. Has built a following over 400,000 on TikTok, 200,000 on YouTube, really like social media. Has a podcast called the Gemma Sugrue podcast. And this is a stand-up comedian. Kind of spoiled who it is by saying who the podcast title is, but we have Gemma Sugrue.
I need to take the stand-up comedian bit out of that bio because it puts you under so much pressure. It's like, be funny. And I'm honestly doing it as a hobby. I used to be a professional singer full time. So I'm used to being on stage and I think I crave a bit of stage time. And so instead of doing music, I was like, oh, I'll just do some stand-up. And there's a good scene here in London to do it. But I wouldn't say I'm actually a stand-up comedian. I don't know when I become that, but yeah.
Fair enough. I have to ask you just real quick. What is the difference between being a stand-up comedian and a vocalist and being on stage? Like, what does that feel like? How much different is it?
So you can be delusional as a singer on stage. You can think that they're probably into it. You know, I don't know, but they probably love it. Stand-up comedian, you don't have any of that delusion. You get instant feedback. You know whether or not you're funny.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Straight away. Like if there's crickets, then it's like you're not good. But you can stay in a nice ignorance bliss kind of thing with singing.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. It seems like that would be the case. It'd be kind of tough. Yeah, most definitely. That's great.
I guess I never thought about that because, when you're singing, you've got your own music as kind of the crutch because, I mean, we're going to dive into it today about songwriting. We always have the philosophy we mentioned a couple of times that most artists write songs for their previous selves. So like when you're singing a song that you've written or that means something to you, it's easy to get lost into it. But I guess stand up, it is like, you gotta, are they engaging? Can I riff off the crowd? All that kind of stuff. But
yeah. And I think, I mean, there's definitely there's going to be a large portion of the population looking up going, I could probably give that a go. I might be funnier than her, I'd say. I mean, we all are funny. Everyone's funny. And so I'm just like brazen enough to get up and do it. But like everybody's funny. So you're going to have that And it's just funny the kind of presumptions people make about you as well. As soon as you stand up on stage, they're like, oh, she's going to be this, or it's going to be about that. Or so that's, but I suppose they do that to performers and singers too. And we give away a lot of that with how we dress and how we stand and how we are and our energy. So there's so much communication even before you play the first chord or say the first joke.
Oh yeah. We're doing a series right now based on the book Influenced by Robert Cialdini, which is all about like different ways that people are influenced, like social proof, authority, stuff like that. And back to back, we keep talking about how, like, yeah, the music industry is as much a fashion industry as it is about music, because visually it is much more exciting for the brain than auditorially, even though it's an audio industry. So you're spot on with that, which kind of driving into what I kind of want to talk about, and what we want to talk about is fashion definitely connects with psychology of being seen, as it is like how you present yourself to the world and connecting with the fan base. Beginners often find themselves struggling when they first start writing music. A lot of times it is like writing for ourselves, what we want to hear, not necessarily writing for an audience in mind at the end of the day. What's kind of your process? Would you mind walking us through like just the very basics of how you recommend artists start writing about songs with the goal in mind of, I want to be an artist for a living, not just this is my hobby, this is my therapy. I actually want to make sure people can connect with it at the end of the day.
Yep. I really agree with that philosophy. Like, right, make good art for yourself. I don't know, is it a Rick Rubin idea? And I often give the advice to people when they're getting on stage. I'm like, give yourself goosebumps. We'll get goosebumps by osmosis. Make yourself feel something. We're all energetic creatures. It's gonna pass on. But in terms of making stuff that's gonna connect and that's gonna, you're going to attract fans, you're going to have something worth sharing. I do think, it's an interesting dichotomy of like what's just, because I really come up against this with content creation, because you figure out some stuff that you really have fun making, and then there's certain things that people like to see you do. And there's this balance to find of what do I like making and what do they like hearing. And you're always trying to find that formula or format. So there is a little bit of catering to the crowd and listening and observing what's working and what isn't working. I do think that we have a real innate intuition for realness that sometimes we can't even articulate or don't even know why we like something. We're just like, I just know I like that. But it's speaking to us on a more intuitive level. And I think if artists can really permit themselves to be and I know it's an overused word, but authentic as possible, like really questioning, is this coming from a real place? Like, is this how I really would say a sentence like that? Or am I writing this lyric because this lyric sounds cool? Or is this how I speak? We have mad detection for that. Like, we can really pick up on that. So, but in terms of making music, I think one of the first things you want to take into consideration is it being sustainable. It's an up and down ride. It's a long road, really, and you're going to get better over time the more and more you write. So I think they have to really tap into not what's going to be successful, but actually tap into what's going to continue to be fun for me to do. Like, can I continue to find fun and lightness and ease in this? So I think that's the bit where they should be very self-serving, that they should really serve the funness in it.
I'm really glad you said that, because my favorite saying of all time, I try to say it every episode, I haven't been saying it lately, but it's, if you're not having fun, you're not taking it seriously enough.
That's great. Yeah. Love that.
For me, it struck a nerve, because like, yeah, if I don't want to keep doing it, it is the long haul. It is the long con. There's no boom, I'm a hit now in music. But we at the studio side hear it all the time, where someone walks in like, man, the song is going to change the way people think of music for the next century. It's like, no, if this is your first song, it ain't going to happen. I'm sorry.
It isn't. And I think you're dead right. And there's something to do with, as soon as we start thinking about the external, about the kind of the outcome, the result, we get very heady and we get very goals and content strategy and fit this sonic trend, and we lose touch with actually what's going to make it really good and stand the test of time, which is like being in our heart more, which is that intuition and that playfulness.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And like, I kind of want to like mention this too, because this kind of riffs off of what we were just kind of talking about, is like, we have the world of music, the world's discography of music at our fingertips these days. And it's funny because like a lot of people, when they come to the studio, they're like, how do I write to this specific format or whatever the case may be? It's like we have never been more accessible to music in history than we are now. So it's interesting to watch people put themselves into these little holes. Right. And a lot of that has to do with, like you were saying, is like the buzzwords that we hear, like making content or looking at the analytics. We're being very over analytical these days, and which makes sense because we're in the information era. We have that at our fingertips and the disposal. So how often do you find artists overthinking songwriting these days? I imagine it's an awful lot, because when they come to the studio, that's all they do is overthink a lot of the time. Not all the time. You know, some people have very clear goals for the song, very clear direction for the song. But sometimes it's like when we're making a choice, that choice takes 30 minutes to kind of dive through, when we could have just laid something down that would have been great as is, right? So how often do you find this happening when you're working with clients?
I feel like that's my full-time job, is getting them out of their heads. Like,
yeah,
it really is. And just calming the nervous system down, you know, getting them out of analysis. You're so right. With all of this access to all this data, it's just, I mean, we've too much data. We've too many statistics. We've too many charts to look at.
It's very paralyzing. Yeah, absolutely.
So paralyzing. And like, there has to be, in everything, in business, in marketing, in writing, art, there has to be experimentation. There has to be a willingness to make something bad and do something wrong, because we're never going to find the good stuff if we don't make the bad stuff. And like, we can't control the outcome. We can control our inputs, like in business, they say lead measures and lag measures. So artists can get very bogged down in the lag measures, which is, did I get more followers? Are people engaging in the thing? Did they stream the song? Am I going to get on this blog? Lag measures should have none of their cognitive resources. All of it should be going into their controllable lead measures. Is, did you write a song this week? Did you come up with a content idea? Did you, like, they're things they can control, their creativity and their output of creativity. So it's trying to redirect all of that energy into that rather than into those lag measures, those result measures.
I completely agree.
That's fantastic.
One of my favorite books that I've read is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he talks about the whole thing of what your sphere of influence is. It's like what is within your sphere, that's what you need to focus on, not the external things. And he also talks about, once you know your sphere, then you can put it into 4 different quadrants. And it goes really in depth. So if you're an artist and you're trying to figure out, okay, I like this concept, where do I start? I highly recommend that book. Or you can, contact Gemma here and she'll have some coaching for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that is a great book recommendation for artists.
And that's the interesting thing, because we just talked about like how, you got to get out of your head. There's so much information. It's paralyzing. It's very data oriented, but it is the music business. And when you are an artist, especially once you get into it and you form a single member LLC, if you're a solo artist, or a multi-member if you're a band or whatever, at least that's how it is in the US with their taxes and all that stuff. You do become a business, and it's helpful to think about and read business books and how to organize it. But also at the same time, still be an artist, still keep it real, be authentic. As you mentioned, like, I forget who the player is. There's a football player who his most popular Instagram post is him like a blurry photo of his alarm clock at like 4 o'clock in the morning saying, waking up for my gym. It's a really crappy looking photo compared to all the really awesome professional things on the page, but it's what connects to people more than anything else on there. Bringing music to football, weird parallel, but yeah, it's the real things that can sometimes get way more attention than the things that are all staged and put together. So having a layer of authenticity in whatever you do and being consistent with it. You also mentioned just getting out there, and you're going to make bad stuff. It's going to, you got to just keep writing, got to keep doing it. That's something that, you practice what you preach. Stand up is pretty much that. The fact that you're actually out there doing it. At the start of this, you said, yeah, maybe someone in the crowd's like, oh, I could do that. I'm funnier than her, but they're not doing it. You are. So that's what I'm hearing is that's the first thing you recommend people to do when trying to journey into songwriting is to just write songs.
Absolutely. I run a course, and it used to be, there's still some pre-recorded material in it, but we recognized that the power was in the doing, the actual giving them education in the aftermath or in the process, rather because I think it got very theoretical and conceptual. And I was like, we're not here to theorize it. We're here to actually do it. And you're not actually, and a lot of them got very paralyzed in the, what's my identity as an artist? Who is my fan avatar? What is my sound? And I'm like, all of this can be discovered by walking through and doing it and be in it. And you will look back on that song and see, this is what I would do differently this time. You will look back on those social media posts and go, this is what I want to do the next time. The learning and evolving, actually, you have to be in process, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think like you've spoken to this already, Gemma, and it's interesting that like we kind of started by talking about the comedy side of things that you have going on, right? Like you said, you have an immediate reaction from people when you do the stand-up bits, right? So we don't have that often as artists unless we're playing live or playing it for somebody else in the room. And even that can even be weird circumstances, right? Depending on who you have in the room with you and what they're willing to tell you, whether it's the truth or not, right? So how often do you suggest people maybe release their music or play live? I mean, I would say like playing live is probably more frequently than not. But how often would you suggest people showcase their music to the world and release it and close that feedback loop? Because that seems like it's like a lot of what we're kind of like resonating with here is closing that feedback loop, putting something out that can be bad so we can refine it later in the process. And even this that I'm saying right now sounds extremely businessy. And you know, I know some people maybe listening are probably like, oh my God, like this is just so left and right brain right now because we're being creative and we're doing the business side of things. So before I fall off the wagon and go down a rabbit hole, how often would you suggest people maybe release their content to the world so they can get that feedback?
Real quick question, just to clarify, are you talking about this is pre-releasing, like officially releasing the music?
This
like,
is just as a singer-songwriter in general.
Okay, like before, like, okay, the song's done. Like, hey, I'm working on this song. I'm performing it or
any way, shape, or form. As long as you can record it and put it out, or as long as you can write it and perform it, right?
Okay, so anywhere along the process.
Anywhere along the process, yep.
So I think there's a couple of ways I'd like to go with this. One of the points that I think is interesting about the conversation we're having, which is touching into business and then it's touching into art and creativity. And I've broken away from being an artist and a songwriter for now so that I could immerse myself in business. And I have found that business has been one of the most creative pursuits of my life. I'm like, oh my God, this is just making. This is just playing and making. So I think that we can have a very playful way of being in. And so we're permitted to actually be artists in business as well. So I think that people can actually approach, okay, how am I going to get this feedback? How am I going to know what's the iterative process now on, progressing these songs and my songwriting and getting good feedback? And if that starts feeling businessy, you have all the intel you need from your artist brain to do that. This is just a sidebar on that. But I think like what I'm noticing, it's always changing because there's always trends and we kind of, somebody's a leader in a trend and they start doing, so you'll see people on TikTok just popping up a half a verse or a bit of a chorus. And I've written this today. I'm so excited about it. What do you think? And if that video blows up, then you're like, well, we're producing that song then, so that's one great way to test the market. And I think actually the big difference now with marketing for artists is that it's both research and marketing at the same time, all the time now. You're always in research mode. You're just testing the audience all the time. Whereas before you'd have to put together this big campaign and this big ramp up to the launch of the release. And now it's out, everybody listen. And then I can't promote it anymore. Where now it's like, do we like this? Are we all happy with this one? Yeah. Will I produce that one then? Okay, I'll go make that one. And then you can promote that as much as you want. So I think, finding ways of like putting it up on SoundCloud. It is hard to get feedback. People sometimes don't want to give you feedback. Sometimes the feedback isn't great. I mean, even if you're doing Submit Hub and all of that, sometimes the feedback is not the best. Yeah. But I think that they also need to get super confident with their own internal feedback, like their own sense of, this is my thing. I'm happy with this. If the world likes it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. But we're putting this out. And I think more is better. I think having a catalogue of just showing up and being like, I'm here to stay. I'm a consistent creator over here. I'm not waiting until I have this perfectly polished product. I'm actually going to continuously, in business, we call it minimal viable product. We want to get something to market, see how it works, iterate, and bring something else out to market. So I think that's a better, more sustainable, way more fun model.
Mm-hmm. So what you're kind of, if I'm hearing it right, is you're saying it's not necessarily always a question of quality. It's a question of quantity, getting used to the process of getting it out there, getting used to, and like developing like, no, I've released all these things. I know what I like at this point because I've done it, put it out there, building up a little bit of a skin of like, if people don't respond or if they say things that like this or whatnot, you can take it with a grain of salt, filtering it through your own lens as an artist. Is that kind of, I'm hearing that correctly?
Yeah. And
it's awareness is the main issue.
I know. And look, I think that there's probably, you don't want to be too scrappy either. I think there's a standard you want to uphold for yourself. But, you know, it often can become, they create a lot more importance and friction around a release than is necessary. And you go back to any artist at the beginning, the first couple of songs, they weren't it. It took them a while, and you're not going to find, it's the same with content. You'll post something that you just, like you said, the guy who took the picture of the alarm clock, you'll post something off the cuff that you didn't really put that much energy into it, but it had heart in it, you know, it was real. And it goes wild. And then you're like, well, now I know this is what people want from me. Okay. So we'll never know until we, you know, put it out there. And I'm never going to know if a joke is funny until I try it out in an audience and they tell me it's funny or not. And you see Dave Chappelle, you see all the huge comedians, they have to all go through that. They have to try all their crap jokes on a live audience. And I've watched them like not Dave Chappelle, for example, but like I've watched professional comedians bomb who I admire so much, but they just had to bomb that night because it's to try out some new material, and that's okay.
Yeah. So kind of speaking about that, I'd like to kind of go in deeper, as you mentioned, like getting on like social media, and one in your bio, it says you're a huge fan of social media and all that, with 40,000 followers on TikTok and 200,000 on YouTube and whatnot, which that's awesome. Very impressive.
Phenomenal.
You also mentioned earlier, like, oh, maybe release on SoundCloud, maybe you release this on TikTok. If you are, so throughout a songwriting process, and if you are just getting into writing music, or even if you've been writing music for a while, are there certain platforms that you recommend artists release songs in certain stages? Because a TikTok is more volume based. You can just post. If it picks up, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. People move on. Whereas like YouTube, it's more like, hey, it stays here. So even though like Shorts is kind of similar, like, would you recommend someone take the same, hey, I wrote this today, what are your thoughts on it, and post it on all platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok? Or just kind of, hey, focus on this in the early stages, move to this when you want more dedicated feedback for your fan base? Or how do you view social media in sharing your songwriting process as you grow and get feedback for a song?
So I think there's being aware of, I know when I look back, when I got obsessed with one platform, just human psychology, if I just got all in on TikTok, for example, I was like, this is all I do. 2 TikToks every day. TikTok is it. I just totally obsessed myself with it. Got used to the platform, got used to the mood of the platform, and figured it out. I figured out how to break through and grow. And then I went, right, what's next? Over here, YouTube. What do they like? And I got possessed about that. So I do think there's some good in just getting very zeroed in on a platform and how a platform works, whatever it is that you're doing. What I tend to advise, what's come up for me with students is that many of them will gravitate to want to use Instagram. A lot of them will be, now unless they're very young, but like most of the students I'm working with are mid-20s, 30s. They want to start on Instagram, but they've mad paralysis about that because they've got family, friends, peers, school friends looking at them going, oh, right, you think you're that, do you? And so they have all of their voices of judgment in their minds, or perceived voices of judgment in their minds. And I think that good content, in the same way good creativity and good art, will come out of, let's just do this for a laugh. So when you're on TikTok, you don't think anybody you know is watching. You're just going to make something for the crack and not overthink it too much and see what happens. So you're way more like emergent. You're way more experimental. And then the algorithm on TikTok is so powerful. Like if you get it right there, it can really blow up very quickly. And I do think it's more of a creative platform. I think it's more musician and artist friendly of all the three. But YouTube, in terms of like really honing a personal brand over time, if you're okay with the longer growth trajectory, it's fab. So I prefer that for myself as a coach, but they would be my thoughts on the platforms.
I appreciate diving into that. Any questions you want to ask, or can I jump in? I think I've asked the last couple of questions.
Go jump in another one if you have one. Yeah.
Of course, now that I've paused, it slipped my mind because that's of course how it happens. I was just so engrossed in the whole like thinking about tackling social media one at a time. If social media is the end goal, like what you said, structuring TikTok first, like diving into it and like actually learning what the platform wants and rewarding what the platform is searching for, and then moving on from there to there, different platforms. We've been kind of doing put things everywhere and slowly learn at once, but not focus too much on it, because it was mainly let's get some volume out there first, and then we'll start focusing it in. But probably not the best approach.
I think that
I remember the question I was going to ask.
I'm just on that. I'm doing that. I do agree with just distributing it. So like that's what I would do I would use, I can't remember, Metricool. And so I'm focused on making content for YouTube, but I'll distribute all the shorts. And actually the thing that I would get students to get excellent at is their short form content creation, like zooming out on how do I make good short form content. So and then that's applicable to the three platforms.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up short form content and how that is like what's growing right now the most. It's really kind of changed how music videos are made and how we kind of view them and how we want to produce them even to pop off. Because you don't want a super long short form video. You don't necessarily want the max 60 seconds. Sometimes, 10, 15, 20 seconds is all you really need to be short, rewatchable, engaging for an artist. How would you look at a song and kind of look at the lyrics? And it's got to be a tough process to be like, okay, well, where do I want to pull from to make a video on from this song? What do I think can be a semi-complete story within this 10, 20 second time frame that will be engaging to people? Is there like a certain attitude or a certain kind of lyrics you recommend pulling from it, or just kind of grab 6 of them throughout the song, make 2-3 videos for each section and throw them all out and see what works? Like, what's kind of your approach to it?
I think that the thing with content creation that requires the most hours, the most thought, the most intensity is the concept. And whether or not that concept needs to take 40 seconds, 50 seconds, 60 seconds for short form, or 10 or 30, the creative idea for the visual to go with the audio requires so much iteration and attention. And again, I'm going to come back to the analogy of comedy. I'll write a joke and then I'll go, well, that joke is basically a Christmas cracker joke. So then I'll write the next version of it. And I'm like, well, now it's basically a dad joke. And then I'll write the next version of it. And I'm like, so I'll just keep layering down. So I would just encourage people to layer down as much as they can into the creative concept. Like there's a great example of, I don't know if you've ever heard of this DJ. He's from the UK, Fatboy Slim. And he has a big song. Yeah. He had a big song in the 90s called Praise You. And the music video is just interpretive dancers in a supermarket. But he was about to do with his label, a lot of money, label bankrolled music video, high production, let's go. And Spike Jonze said, if you've got $40, I can give these guys some free pizza and we're just going to video them in the supermarket and put the song over it. And it's an awesome music video. It's so good. So I really agree with it's all about the creativity in the concept, in the idea. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think just read and really knowing you're an artist, you're a creative person. Dig, you like pull from the deep resources that you pull from when you're writing the lyric and when you're writing the melody. That's the same place you'll find your concept for the content, and you treat it that way as well.
No, I think that does answer the question. Because if you look at your song and say, okay, these couple sections, they inspire me to develop a concept, like they have a visual that is sparked in my head, let me now develop that based around that. Not necessarily like, oh, this is actually 40 seconds to complete this whole kind of idea within the verse. I can't use that, it's too long. Being like, well, I'm really inspired visually to do it, so let's at least try and go to that aspect. Okay. Yeah, no, that does answer it.
Yeah. So I kind of want to kind of piggyback off that and play maybe like a contrasting comment or a question to this, is that should you ever let the content that you want to generate from or in just for social media, should that ever dictate what you put in your song? Should you ever think about that and try to incorporate some kind of songwriting measure that might translate well from social media to the song itself? Seems like it would be kind of like an interesting way to look at it, but also seems like a way that people would get really stumped really quick and then all of a sudden get some writer's block from it.
I mean, my first thought is like, why not? Is it like the next level of songwriting prompt that you have? I mean, when you think about the way songs are, what are they, 3.5 minutes long? It was to fit the CD, it was to fit the record, it was to fit vinyl. We had EPs, we had albums. It was all to fit the thing that was the model or the mechanism that was housing the music. And so now we have social media, which is what we're kind of fitting music to a little bit. And I do think it's a constraint, but from constraints come creativity. It's up to us now to, but again, it's just always making the star of the show the idea, the concept, the creative element in it. So if it prompts creativity, yay. But if it's coming from a place of, this is how I'll blow up and get successful, they mightn't end up making something good.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, though. And we've talked about that a lot. It just like, I mean, what we've been talking about here too is just having that authenticity factor, paired in the music, because that's what it's always been in human history, right? It's always been authentic. And now we're in this day and age where things are starting to get a little bit more manufactured at some points, which is fine. There's two sides of a coin, right? And there's a time and place. But my next question would kind of be like, what are maybe some general tips for maybe like songwriters to help better reach their audience, through their songwriting? Like, is there a specific kind of format of songwriting that appeals more to audiences in general? Or is it all like very specific to who the artist is? Like, I'm thinking maybe more of like a narrative based songwriting style, like a Taylor Swift, you might get that from Taylor Swift, right? What has been your experience along the way? And what do you normally like to kind of like maybe tell people to help connect with their audience maybe a little bit better if they're not already connecting?
So is this like using social media to connect better with the audience, or is it premeditating the songwriting with that in mind?
Be like more premeditation, I would say.
Is this kind of from the perspective of, let's say an artist is doing this for 4 years and they've seemed kind of stagnant, like something's not quite touching, like how do they revisit it?
I think more beginners.
Okay, you're still focused on
beginner focus for this one.
Again, I would want them to be in the frame of making music and being happy. Like for me, like I found a job that I would do for free for the rest of my life. And I kind of want people to find a way of doing music that it would be okay if nobody ever listened to it. To get that level of fulfillment and enjoyment from it. Now, music is better when other people enjoy it too. And my life is better when I have people to help. So we need people. And maybe that's what it's all about. It's all about, because this is something that really helps people who get stage fright or nerves about being on stage. I'm like, be in service of everyone there. Don't. That's the only way I think the only way of you escaping your internal monologue is it's not about you. This is never about you. This is about the band. This is about them. This is about connecting. This is about relationship. And I think with songwriting, you have to get really good, and it's a habit of putting yourself in the listener's shoes. It's a habit of putting yourself in the viewer's shoes when they watch. Like, why would somebody keep watching that video? What value is it for them? So there's that question of what value are you bringing, and trying to be as in service as possible. So I think that's like the mindset shift that they might want to make. And if they feel like it's not clicking or not hitting, there's something off with the value isn't quite there yet for people to connect with.
Sure.
So kind of like, if putting yourself in the shoes of the listener, like if I wasn't the one who wrote this song, if I wasn't me, would I be able to relate to this? And kind of looking at it from that lens, like, does this matter to me if I wasn't me?
Yeah. Like what does it, how does it serve me? And honestly, I'm a big music listener, lover, longtime listener. Like I'm always looking for new music, and I'm often left with not the music that I want. There's music I want for a vibe when I'm commuting. There's music I want when I lift heavy weights. There's music I want when I run. There's music I want when I'm trying to calm down on a walk. So I think like thinking about the function of music as well can be really helpful, and going, how is somebody going to use this? How is this going to be helpful for somebody?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just the ability of having playlists on Spotify, on Apple Music or whatever, I think really speaks to that really well. Somebody asked me the other day when they were over for a studio session, they were like, oh shit, like how many playlists do you have? I was like, oh, I have one, playlist, because like I drive a lot, and then outside of that, like just like working with music all day, I'll generally put on a podcast instead, on the way home or something. So I don't spend a lot of time with music outside of the studio most of the time, but recently I've been a little bit better. But he was like, oh, I have like 14 different playlists. I was like, that is like mind boggling to me, because like personally for me, I wouldn't have that, but like, I always forget that is the case. It's a time and place for specific things. Right. And like, even going back to like a couple of questions ago, when we were talking about using social media to kind of dictate what kind of music that you make or what you do with your music. I mean, I think lo-fi kind of music is like one of the best examples of that, because lo-fi music is made for like creators sometimes in mind. I would say like at least 30% of the time. Now I'm not saying that there aren't any like lo-fi creators out there or artists that are making it just for the love of it, but I would say like the lo-fi like genre is definitely dictated towards content, like and social media, because it's like 30-second, 60-second minute songs. So no, it's just really interesting hearing you say that. It makes just a ton of sense. And I do have a very specific question that kind of trails off of what we were just kind of talking about, is framing the song in terms of the lyrics, right? You want people to connect with it. How do you feel about personal pronouns in songs? I've heard people overuse I and me a ton. How does that generally connect with people outside of that person? Do you recommend maybe rewriting it for more you-based like statements in your lyrics where the listener feels like they're talking to them, or should you keep it authentic and personal? And when do you kind of make that decision?
Now, I will preface this with I have a songwriting coach in my program. And so I tend to be more in the social media and mindset chair. However, I still have an opinion that I would love to share.
Please do.
So what comes to mind is the you when you're saying, so if it's first person, like, okay, so I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I have a thought process about great art and great music. The cost of entry is vulnerability. And once the I is a vulnerable I, is a being actually seen I love it. I think that the you, when it goes into the second person, that's market, that it can get markety, because that's everything we would use that always in marketing. You can do this, right? So that can actually be kind of, it can be sometimes a bit abrasive or intense, but that could be exactly what you want. That could be the move. So they'd be my thoughts there. But again, once it's serving the idea, once it's serving it and once you're aware of it. But I think that vulnerability piece is really important when the I is involved.
Sure. And sorry about that. Was like more of a question really for me, because I do see it a lot, and then people trying to rewrite lyrics and really like sit down with, like, I always joke that it's like the scene in the movie where people are like furiously writing on the table, crumpling up papers and throwing it behind them at night with the little like light on there, because they're analyzing their lyrics so much and rewriting until it's perfect. So that one was really for me. So I apologize if I just totally hijacked that conversation, because like I think it's important though, because I struggle with that, where there's somebody specific in mind that I'm thinking of that I work with, and there's just a lot of I statements in there. I'm just like, oh man, like that's like too much, you know, that's like too much too much me at some point. And like, if I'm feeling that, I feel like the audience would also feel something along the lines of that. So,
and that goes back to what Gemma was saying, was if it's authentic, if you can step out of your own head and be like, no, that I still feel that as a listener, not necessarily the artist, then it makes sense.
Totally.
Or you can do both. Like what's the song? I don't forget what it's called, but the Ed Sheeran song where it's an I'll keep loving you till like 70. It's like, you can do both. Why not?
Yep, absolutely.
So no matter what, someone can relate to it. So we only got a couple minutes left. Want to respect your time. Really appreciate you coming on this interview. The one question I want to ask before we wrap it up is there anything that kind of relates to this that maybe we haven't asked you or prepped on this topic that you think would be beneficial that you just kind of want to talk about real quick?
Yeah, I think I loved the theme of the conversation today, which was very much on that balance of, I think it's on that balance of head and heart, business and creative, what they want, what you want. It's this finding a sweet spot, negotiating it. I think being vulnerable, catching yourself when you're getting in your head about things. And I think we can be very externally influenced. I mean, it's just, the whole world is on top of us every day in the palm of our hands. And I really would encourage artists to find like their own voice. And what I mean by that is like their own place that will help them say, this is a good song. This is the right thing to post. This is the right next decision. This is the right next step, to really try to tune into that. And they're not going to get that from a logic place. That's going to be from the heart. It's from their intuition. And they're better than anyone else at that stuff. They just really need to listen to it and not get caught up in the noise of what everybody else is doing. And I better be on this trend. And if I don't do this, I'm not going to be successful. Get into their heart as a practice as much as they can, because that's where all the good stuff will flow from.
Great. Yeah. And
awesome.
And speaking of next steps, if an artist is listening to this and they would like to do some, coaching and to learn more about this whole aspect from you, where can they go to find out and where can they find you?
So my website is trueartist.co.uk, or they'll find me online on Instagram or YouTube. And we help them be consistently creative and do it in a very kind of aligned, fulfilling way that's sustainable and that aligns with their own personal goals for music. And it's a very interactive community. Everybody collaborates, co-writes together, makes friends. They book Airbnbs and go hang out, and it's a lovely gang.
That's fantastic.
That's great. And you said this was all online based too, right? I just want to clarify for our listeners, just in case they're like, oh, do I have to be in a specific place? You said this is all remote, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, for sure.
So great. Yeah, we'll have all that kind of contact information, those links to social medias in the description. So if you want easy links, you can go down there and learn more about Gemma. With that being said, thank you for coming in. All right. So that was a fantastic interview that we just had. I really, really enjoyed it. Honestly, I really wasn't expecting you to bring up the point of how you should use I statements or you statements in songwriting, but that's a really important thing to kind of consider. It's so funny. I brought it up one time in my English class at U of M. It was like one of my first classes I ever talked about you and I statements, and the teacher, he didn't understand what even I was trying to get across. He was like, how should we talk to each other in a respectful way, right? Yeah, but Gemma did. And Gemma totally understood 100%. And I brought it up in that class, and he was like, I don't understand what you're trying to say here. And I just think it's so important because I think about it a lot, about how things are framed and how things are communicated, and communication is important. And that also spills over into the music side of things. Yeah. The anecdote of me in class was not what we talked about, obviously, in the interview, what you just learned. But it's very important, though, that you remain cognizant, I think, of how you're expressing yourself through your music and how you can connect better with your audience overall. Yeah, because you really want the people who are listening to be able to connect with the things you're saying. Absolutely. That's why they become fans. So, like I said, I hear a lot of people use I, me a lot in their songs, and I think that's a normal way to write. That's how we communicate as human beings. But sometimes it is better to open it up to more expressive or more telling statements, right? And I'm glad that she was able to shed some light on that. And also just the authenticity of it all. So exactly. I wasn't expecting the conversation to go that part. I'm really happy that totally hijacked it. That was my bad. It was fun though. And I'm really glad we did the whole combining the creative side as an artist versus the business side, and how they can, how being a business can be creative and not letting the business aspects, the analytics get in the way of being a songwriter, of making your own music, of performing your own music. So all this stuff's really important. And it was just a really nice, good conversation.
It was
kind of talking all about that.
Absolutely. So. It definitely was. I really enjoyed her part about the feedback loops too. Like it just worked. Yeah. You know,
I know.
When she said minimal viable product, I was like, yep.
Well, did you, in the recording, if you watched on YouTube, I'm like,
I watched you do it. It was great. And when she said minimum viable product, I was like, yep, we're good.
We good.
They were good. We
tackled it.
Yep, we did it. So
with that being said, she's had all the information on how you can contact her for more of her services. If you want to reach out to us, give us some information like your feedback on the podcast, some suggestions on what you want us to cover in the future, you can reach out to us at podcast@musicmakerscookbook.com. If you would like to more specifically work with one of us, particularly me at this point in time, SWS Recordings is my studio website. I do remote. No, we're gonna get to you later.
I was like, what the hell?
Well, I'm not gonna tell them how to contact you because you know that better than I do.
That's
so
fair.
we'll move
That's
on
fair.
to you.
That's
but
fair.
no,
That's fair.
if you make acoustic, folk, rock, that kind of music, and you want some remote mixing, mastering, or if you're local, you can find out and contact me at swsrecordings.com. I also do more one-on-one independent artist coaching, so kind of help put your release strategy together, get your song out there, build a content calendar, things like that. Just really help take your music to the next level. Brandon, how can they find you?
Oh, well, thanks, Sean. At this particular, no, I'm just playing.
And that's the end. Bon appetit.
See, I thought it was because we were in your studio today that you're like, in this particular episode, I was like, oh, okay. Like, what the hell?
No,
I know. I'm just messing with them. Yeah, so if you want to work with me, you can reach out to me at www.studio222recording.com. I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in the world that still says www. Did you say that? Nope. I don't think you did. Nope. See, I'm
HTTP://
Yeah, I gotta have that SSL certificate in there.
Yes.
Make sure it's safe. Google likes
Anyways,
that.
222.
I'm so sorry. We'll talk about that actually in a future episode, I'm sure, because it actually has to do with SEO. Anyways, fun. Where am I?
222.
Yeah, studio222recording.com. You can contact me through there. You can send me a message through there, there's a couple emails you can kind of send to there if you want to inquire about any services. I do tracking, mixing, mastering, both remotely and in person. Hip hop, rock, I don't really care. I'll work on it if you just hit me up. Like it's just kind of fun. So then you can also find me on social medias too. I am definitely less present there, but you can message me on social medias. It's usually at studio222recording.com or at studio222recording or _ Brandon McLeod. Easy as pie. So
there you go. Yeah.
Yep.
He's also got some great resources on his page. So
they're
even
cool.
if you're not working on something currently, he's got some good information there. So
Sean's gassing me
checking
up.
that out.
He's gassing me up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sean.
But anyways, thank you for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you making it through this whole episode. Let us know what you learned from this podcast. If you really like having guests like this, what other guests you'd like us to have on this podcast. And yeah.
Bon appetit.